Of all the cubers in the world, do I know the most algorithms? Absolutely not. There are many people who know more and are much faster than me. Am I the best at learning algorithms? Still no. So why am I making this video? To be honest, why not? And I feel like I have been cubing for a while, and I notice a lot of newer cubers don't really know how to learn algorithms, and learning algorithms is a really important part of getting faster, and if you can get faster at learning algorithms, then you can get faster at getting faster. Anyway, the main mistakes that I notice in beginners are that they memorize algorithms move by move, they don't look at the cube, and they don't deliberately practice algorithms. So I'll go over what each of these means in my next section, which is kind of just going to be how should you learn algorithms. So as I just briefly mentioned, I notice a lot of newer cubers don't really look at the cube when they're doing an algorithm. So for example, when they're doing a soon, they don't look at the cube and they just memorize R, U, R prime, U, R, U to R prime. Now the reason I know that one is because like use it so much and it's kind of short, so you just memorize that one. But you shouldn't be memorizing algorithms move by move. So if I take the same soon example, instead of memorizing R, U, R prime, U, R, U to R prime, I like to track the front right pair and sort of do it as like you take it out, you move it away, and then you put it back into the spot. And that's kind of a vague description, but that's sort of how I describe it to myself. And the important distinction here is that I'm memorizing how the pieces move instead of the moves of the algorithm itself. And this is really helpful because this is faster than trying to memorize all the moves, and it's easier to remember how the cube is supposed to move instead of what moves are in a specific algorithm. Another really useful tip in learning algorithms faster is that you should try to group moves together as much as you can. So the simplest example of this is this OLL, where the algorithm is basically F triple sexy F prime. So if you know what the sexy move is, which is just R U R prime U prime, and you just memorize the starter moves at the beginning and the ending move at the end, you realize that it's not as long as the algorithm itself looks. By grouping moves together, it shortens algorithms essentially, and it makes you have to memorize less of the algorithm, which ultimately is going to make you memorize faster, which obviously is a good thing. And another kind of simple example is this T shape, which is also the second half of the Y perm and the first half of the T perm, if you know, so I'll touch on that in a second. I pulled this screenshot from Cube Skills, but basically the little parentheses, you should treat them as sections of the algorithm that you can memorize at a time. You can also call them triggers, where each section sort of is a nice little set of moves by itself, and by treating them as groups, you can do like one group at a time, and it's easier to memorize an algorithm that way instead of memorizing every individual move inside the algorithm. Another really useful tip, although I don't think it becomes extremely evident at the beginning, you start noticing these things as you learn more algorithms, but basically you want to recognize algorithms as parts or variations of other algorithms. So obviously if you don't know a lot of algorithms, this will be a little bit difficult. So I have a few examples for this one. There are a few ZBLLs that are basically just one algorithm plus another algorithm. So for example, in this COLL, it's soon plus another COLL, and then when you put them together, you get a ZBLL. So the only thing you have to learn in that case would be how to recognize the case, since you already know the two algorithms that make up that algorithm. Another ZBLL example is this kind of simple looking case. There are a couple ugly algorithms for it. I don't really know if this is the best algorithm, but I do F prime, N perm, F. And obviously that's a lot of moves. If you memorize it move by move, it's a lot. But if you're learning ZBLL, you most likely know PLL. So all you have to memorize is F prime, M perm, F. Much easier than memorizing every single move in the algorithm. Lastly, a more beginner-oriented variation or parts of an algorithm are the T perm and the Y perm and the two associated OLLs. So if you don't know, there are two relatively simple OLLs that if you combine them, you can get the T perm, and if you combine them in the other order, you can get the Y perm. So basically by learning these two algorithms, you learn 4 algorithms, which is obviously really great and will help you learn the rest of the OLL and the rest of the PLLs much faster. As for variations of other algorithms, one simple example of this is the fat soon OLL. So a lot of people learn soon super early, where again, just R U, R prime U, R U to R prime, whatever. But fat soon basically just turns the R's into fat R's or wide R's. And at that rate, you basically already know the algorithm, you just need to change a few moves in them. So that's what I mean by variations of other algorithms. So some algorithms are really similar to other ones, and if you just memorize the difference between them, it's usually easier than memorizing each algorithm separately. The last thing I talked about that beginners don't really do is that they don't deliberately practice algorithms. So for example, they would learn the y-perm and then not do anything about it and only practice the y-perm if they got the y-perm in a solve. But obviously you don't get the y-perm in a solve, and it's rather difficult, I think, to ingrain in your muscle memory and your visual memory an algorithm if you only do it when it comes up in a solve. So I use a website for this. It's called bestsiteever.ru/oll/pll/zbll, which is the one that I mainly use. This website is really great because it allows you to select the algorithms that you know and the ones that you want to practice, and it will give you setups to those algorithms, and you can work on your recognition and ability to execute those algorithms. I really started using this more when I started learning ZBLL, because at the very beginning of learning ZBLL, I would sort of memorize one algorithm, and then I would only practice it if it came up in a solve, and ZBLL comes up even less than OLL and PLL. So I would usually learn a bunch of algorithms and then forget them because I was never actually practicing them. So I have this website bookmarked. I use it pretty much whenever I practice. I usually like divide my practice session into like practicing algs and practicing speed. But yeah, this website is super useful. And kind of just to recap, what you should do is that you should actually look at the cube when you're turning, because visual movements of pieces is super helpful in ingraining in your muscle memory and your visual memory how an algorithm is supposed to go. Additionally, you should memorize how the pieces move, not the moves of the algorithm itself. And if possible, try to group moves together, as it essentially shortens the length of the algorithm, making it easier for you to memorize. And as you learn more algorithms and get more advanced, try to recognize algorithms as parts of other algorithms or variations of other algorithms, because learning them as sections of other algorithms or as like a little bit different than a different algorithm is much easier than learning a completely new algorithm. And lastly, practice all the algorithms you know. This is kind of repetitive and everyone tells you, but practice makes perfect, and if you don't practice the algs that you learn, you're never going to actually learn them. That became a bit more ranty than I expected, but it's just been something I've been thinking about for a while, because I think it's really important to know how to learn, not just in cubing, but in life. This is getting a little too philosophical, so I'll just cut it there. And if you enjoyed, make sure to bop that like button and hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon.